Have you ever felt like your faith is growing lukewarm? As if, in the midst of the rush, doubts, and setbacks of life, something had been lost along the way? If so, you are not alone. But what if I told you that there is a book within the Bible itself that carries a force capable of reigniting all of this? We're not talking about magic formulas or ready-made phrases, but about real stories, full of living faith, spiritual courage, and obedience even when everything seemed lost. Get ready. This reading may not only inspire you, but turn you inside out. Real faith is not just a beautiful feeling that we keep in our hearts, it is movement. This is what made Abraham abandon everything he knew, without a map or guarantee, just because God said, "Go." It was the same impulse that made Moses face off against Pharaoh, even though he knew it could cost him everything. And it was faith that made David run toward a giant when everyone else was running toward him. Real faith acts even when fear screams. Logic looks at the impossible and says, "It can't be done." Faith looks at the same scenario and responds, "But God can." This is how the heroes of the Bible left their mark. They didn't wait for security to obey. They obeyed first, and security came later. That's what faith is, trusting before seeing. You don't need to have everything under control to take the next step. You just need to trust the person who has control over everything. If you feel like your faith is weak, maybe it's because it's been stuck. Faith grows stronger in movement, when we obey, even without understanding, when we choose to trust, even without signs. So, how about today making a small choice based on faith and not fear? Because that's how incredible stories begin, with steps that seem small, but are guided by giant trust. When we talk about faith, it all starts with Abraham. Imagine being asked to leave your home, your plans, and even your logic, without even knowing where you are going. Well, that's what he did. And not because he was crazy, but because he trusted God's promises more than the circumstances around him. Genesis shows us that faith is not passive. It is an active response to a voice that not everyone hears, but that those who believe learn to follow. And the peak of Abraham's faith appears when God asks the impossible, to sacrifice Isaac, his son of promise. It didn't make any sense, and yet he obeyed. It was proof that his trust in God was greater than his attachment to his own dreams. And do you know the most surprising thing? God did not want the sacrifice itself, but rather to reveal that obedience paves the way for miracles. Faith that refuses to negotiate with fear is the kind that God honors. Do you want to renew your faith? Get back to basics. Read Genesis with attentive eyes and an open heart. Notice how Abraham's walk was not perfect, but it was constant. With each stumble, he got up. With each test, he chose to trust. And that's what God expects from you today, that you take the next step with faith, even without understanding the end of the story. Because, in the end, whoever walks with God never walks in vain. It is in crises that faith shows its true face. When Moses was called by God at the burning bush, his first reaction was not courage, it was fear. He tried to escape the call, doubted himself, stumbled over his words. But still, God chose him. Why? Because God does not look for the most prepared, but rather those most willing to trust. And Moses, in fits and starts, decided to obey. This changed everything. During the Exodus, the Israelites experienced a festival of biblical miracles, plagues, the sea parting, bread falling from the sky. And yet, with each new difficulty, doubt returned. The crossing of the desert showed that faith is not only built in moments of glory, it needs to resist days of silence. God wanted to teach something there. Trust cannot depend on circumstances. She needs to be anchored in her relationship with Him. If today you feel like you are in a desert, without clear direction or quick answers, know, God is still leading. He didn't take you out of Egypt to abandon you along the way. Use this time to develop daily obedience, how to pray without seeing results, how to give thanks before the miracle. Because the faith that survives the crisis is the same that conquers the promise. And the desert, no matter how harsh it may seem, is never the final destination. Here begins a challenge that many people ignore, living faith in the details of everyday life. In Leviticus and Numbers, God no longer speaks in thunder and spectacular miracles. He teaches about laws, sacrifices, and routines. And that's where faith shows maturity, when we obey not only in emergencies, but also in small things. Trusting God also means following instructions that may not always seem exciting, but are fundamental. These books show that even leaders fail when they exchange obedience for impulse. Moses, for example, struck the rock instead of just speaking to it, as God had commanded. Did the water come out? It went out. But the consequence came: he could not enter the promised land. This teaches a strong lesson. It is not enough for the result to be right if the path was wrong. True faith involves listening carefully and obeying with reverence. Do you want to exercise your faith? Start by obeying God behind the scenes in life. When no one sees, when it seems insignificant, pray regularly, forgive without an audience, take care of your integrity. Don't underestimate the power of constancy. This is how you build a relationship with God that stands the test of time, and it is this firm foundation that will sustain you when the strong winds come. After years in the desert, the time has come to move forward. But it wasn't just a change of scenery, it was a change of mindset. In Deuteronomy, Moses prepares the people to truly trust God and not just follow custom. Joshua takes command and immediately faces Jericho, a fortified city that, in human eyes, was impossible to conquer. But faith does not consult the obvious. She obeys, even when the strategy seems strange. God tells the people to walk around in silence for 7 days. No sword, no shouting, just confident steps. And on the last day, with the sound of trumpets and accumulated faith, the walls simply fall. This teaches us that spiritual courage is not the absence of fear. It is moving forward even when trembling, because you know who is in charge. Active faith is one that does not paralyze in the face of challenges, but walks with God even when our feet still tremble. Do you want to develop this courage? Look at the past and see how many times God has supported you. Remembering what He did is the fuel to face what is yet to come. And remember, many times, the walls don't fall because you haven't taken the 7th lap yet. Continue. Obey. Trust. Victory has already been promised. What's missing is just the last trumpet of your perseverance. Soon after the great achievements, something unexpected happens. The people forget. Forget where you came from, what God did, and what faith cost. The book of Judges shows a repetitive and painful cycle: disobedience, oppression, repentance, and liberation. Sound familiar? It is the portrait of a faith that was neither cultivated nor passed on. When faith becomes empty tradition, the relationship with God cools, and the consequences appear. Even so, God does not give up. He raises unlikely leaders, like Deborah, a woman in a time dominated by men, Gideon, a fearful man hiding in the winepress, and even Samson with all his excesses. This reveals that God uses real people, with real flaws, to fulfill extraordinary plans. Each judge represents a divine response to the cry of a people who were moving away, but who could still be reached by grace. If you feel like you're stuck in cycles, falling, getting up, promising to change, and falling again, maybe it's time to revisit your roots. Return to the Word. Return to daily obedience. Don't wait to fall to get it. Faith needs to be constantly nourished, otherwise it weakens. The book of Judges is a living warning. Without a relationship with God, even victory becomes oblivion. But with Him, there is always a fresh start. Ruth did not need a stage, sword, or spectacular miracle to demonstrate her faith. Her story is made up of simple gestures: choosing to stay, working with dignity, respecting her mother-in-law, starting over. But that's exactly where the beauty lies. Her faith didn't scream, she whispered, but firmly. In the midst of loss, scarcity, and uncertainty, Ruth trusted in a God that wasn't even hers originally, and became part of the Messiah's bloodline. Ruth's loyalty goes beyond logic. She could have returned to her homeland, continued her life, sought safety. But He chose the most difficult path, that of obedience, care, presence. And it was precisely this insignificant choice that placed her in God's plans of redemption. Sometimes the most powerful faith is the one that no one applauds, but that God watches carefully and honors with providence. If today your life seems too simple to have any spiritual impact, think about Ruth. Her routine was picking ears of corn, and yet God was leading her to her purpose. Stay strong in the little things: your work, your family, your daily decisions. Relational faith is faith that shapes the heart, not just the circumstances. And it is this faith, silent but constant, that moves the heavens in a profound way. When we talk about spiritual leadership, we immediately think of great speeches and landmark decisions. But the Bible shows that true leadership comes from faith. Saul, for example, started well, but lost his way due to fear of other people's opinions and lack of trust in God. David, even though he was imperfect, cultivated a heart according to the Lord. His faith took him from sheep shepherd to king, and this didn't happen overnight, but was built in intimacy with God. David faced external giants, like Goliath, and internal ones, like adultery and pride. But what kept his story standing was his readiness to repent, turn back and seek the presence of God. It was he who wrote the Psalms, sincere prayers that reveal that faith is not the absence of error, but constancy in the relationship with the Father. The secret of his leadership was not on the throne, but on the altar. If you have any kind of influence, in your family, at work, at church, know your faith impacts more than you imagine. People don't expect perfection, but consistency. Cultivate your faith before trying to lead others. Start with spiritual discipline, practice daily obedience, and never neglect your time with God. Because those who lead with faith inspire transformation, not only in words, but by their own example. After all this, one question remains: how is your faith? Is it being fueled by daily obedience, spiritual courage, and trust in God's promises, or has it become lost in routine, fear, and rush? Maybe you identified with Abraham, who needed to leave his comfort zone, or with the Israelites in the desert, who faltered even after seeing miracles. The good news: God is still writing your story, and just waits for your yes to continue. Now that you've seen these living examples of faith, from Genesis to Ruth, through crises, miracles, sacrifices, and redemption, how about putting them into practice? How about opening the Bible, praying with intentionality, making decisions based on faith and not fear? What will transform your life is not knowing everything, but applying what God has already shown you. And the best time for this to start is now. If this content spoke to you, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who also needs to renew their faith. Every click of yours could be the beginning of a new journey, and who knows, your courage today will inspire someone's transformation tomorrow.